So in southeastern Europe, there's this one country called Bulgaria. Let's talk about the history of it. So, in the 600s AD, like from 1632 to 1667, or 1668 if you want to, there was this one country, I guess, called Old Great Bulgaria. It was just like a group of people that lived in modern-day Crimea and the southern part of Ukraine. But soon after that, they fled. Groups fled. One to the north, one to the east, and one to the south. The one to the south ended up becoming the first Bulgarian Empire, and they later expanded to what is now modern-day Romania, Ukraine, some parts of Ukraine, and Serbia. Anyway, at that point, they were pretty huge. Like, they covered most of the Balkans in the 900s. But then, they later got invaded by other countries or places. The terminology here is very, vague, because it didn't have, any organizations or anything back then, like literally 1,000 years ago. So they got invaded and pushed back into what is now modern day Serbia, Macedonia, Albania, and Greece. And soon, shortly after that fell, almost 100 years, over 100 years later actually, the first Bulgarian Empire arose, and is what is now modern day Bulgaria, most of Serbia, most of Macedonia, tiny part of Albania, and most of northern Greece. But that only lasted until around 1200s. Well, it lasted till 1300s, but around the 1200s, the Mongols tried to invade them, and they invaded a small portion of them. Also, around this time, there's the Tsardom of Bulgaria, and if you look at that second date, you'll think, wait a minute, that falls in line with the first Bulgarian Empire. And I looked up on Wikipedia, and there isn't a lot of information on it, but it existed at the same time, so yeah. Also, in the 1300s, Bulgaria was getting attacked by the Ottoman Empire, and had a war with them wars with them that lasted 30 years, until the Ottoman Empire finally invaded in 1393. 500 years later, after Ottoman rule, there was a couple uprisings, but they all failed. But around 1877, when Romania declared independence with help of Russia, they decided, backed with Russia, decided to take some land, quite a bit of land, and they invaded a huge part of what is now modern day Bulgaria and East Thrace. They ended up having peace, and the Principality of Bulgaria was made as vassal, sort of. Well, Principality in the Ottoman Empire, with Eastern Rumelia, being part of the Ottoman Empire itself. Now, they had two kings, Alexander I and Ferdinand, and that lasted until 1908. And then in 1885, from November 14 to November 24th, Serbia and Bulgaria fought a war, but it ended quickly after in the Treaty of Bucharest, signed in Romania. Also in 1908, Bulgaria at this time would declare independence, and with this, they united with Eastern Rumelia. Yeah, so they became the Kingdom of Bulgaria after this. In 1912, when the newly formed nations around the Balkans invaded all of Ottoman Europe except for Istanbul, Bulgaria got a huge part, but still, they wanted more land, especially they wanted more land in what is now modern-day Macedonia and Anatolia. Well, this ended up being a huge mistake because when they tried to, the Second Balkan War, well, erupted, and like all nations, including the Ottoman Empire around it, decided to invade, and they invaded some parts of it and kept it. But then the Great War, aka World War I, they decided to go with the Axis powers, with Germany, the Ottoman Empire, and the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And around this time, Serbia decided to join the Allies and were invaded by the Axis powers. And then later, Romania decided to join the Allies because Russia was getting pounded by the Axis, and they also got pounded. But then, when 1918 came around, allies were coming from what is now modern-day Greece. Well, technically it was Greece back then also, but and they had several reforms, but they still stayed as a kingdom. Fast forward about 30 years, and Nazi Germany exists, and World War II has started, and in 1941, they sign, Japan, Italy, and Germany decide to sign the Tripartite Pact, which is basically a pact of nations that are basically puppet states that are allied with Nazi Germany and Italy and Japan, And the Kingdom of Bulgaria at this time was now a Nazi puppet state, but only for a couple of years until around 1944. But I'll get into that later. They invaded most of northern Greece and most of what is now modern-day Macedonia. But in 1944, they had a communist coup d'état, and the Communist Party took over Bulgaria. And in 1945, the lands that they took became part of Greece and part of the Socialist Republic of Macedonia, which belonged to Yugoslavia, and the People's Republic of Bulgaria was formed. Now, there's a lot of presidents in just the about 40 years it existed. Too much to name, I'll just show them on the screen right now. But anyway, after that, after showing all of them, they in the 1950s, they were an Eastern Bloc country, so they joined the Warsaw Pact, which was, a pact of nations, well, technically, I guess, puppet states, if you would, to protect the Soviet Union, and Bulgaria was one of them. Now, speaking about fast forwarding a little bit, around the 80s, the borders of Bulgaria were fairly open with places like Yugoslavia and Romania, well with other communist states, if you would call it that. They were somewhat open, but also speaking about borders, since 1945 all the way in 1990, there were Turks along the Turkish-Bulgarian border who were stuck in Bulgaria, and around 1988, things became a little more relaxed, and if you were from Yugoslavia, you could visit Bulgaria, but you still obviously needed a good reason to come into the country. And in the 1980s, Bulgaria was just one of those just stale countries. Not a lot was going on in their GDP, or at least according to their economics. Things were fairly cheap there as well. Then the fall of communism came in from 1989 to 1991 across the world. And Bulgaria was one of those nations. First off, they changed their flag and, well, their government and a lot of stuff. So now people could actually leave the country, immigrate to other countries during this time. And also, fast forward a little bit, in 2004 to 2007, they joined the EU and NATO. The reason why they wanted to do that was because they didn't really have to go through the immigration process of going to another country, because in the EU you don't have to go through that entire process, because you can go to freely to any country. So since then, Bulgaria's population has been steadily declining since 1990, and they dropped over 1 million people since then. But anyway, now Bulgaria, they have 7 million people. Their president is Rumev Radev, and and their capital is Sofia, and they have some resort cities in the Black Sea, on their coast of it, and that's really all I can say about it. So I hope you liked the video. Subscribe if you like to. Also subscribe to my other channel, LegoNick33, if you like to. And goodbye.